Hey everybody, welcome to our Fluid Thinking Live event. My name is Stephanie Crane and I'm the brand manager here for Peak Commercial and Industrial, and I am so excited about today's event. We are calling this Coolants and Coffee. So if you haven't done so already, grab your coffee because we're going to have you guys just relax, settle in, and enjoy some conversation because we have two of our experts, our coolant experts, that are live here with us at our world headquarters. I'm so happy to introduce Mr. Ron Moser and Mr. Joe Long. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie, for inviting us in.
Absolutely, welcome. So I know we're in our Chicago headquarters right now, and I know, Ron, you're originally from the West Virginia area, currently living in Texas.
That's right.
And you're basically traveling around the country, talking to all of our heavy-duty customers around our NHRA trainings, talking all about coolant.
I love to train for coolants.
Excellent. Well, we can't thank you enough for you traveling in and being here today. And Mr. Joe.
There you go.
Yes, you're originally from the New York area.
I'm born and raised in the Bronx, yes, New York City.
There you go. And you're currently living in Connecticut right now.
Yes, we live in the suburbs of New York in Connecticut.
Excellent. And you are also, just like Ron, traveling across the country, not only helping to do business development, but you're also training our customers around our NHRA training.
A lot of training is what I do. That's Joe the Trainer. Heavy duty business development is what I do.
Excellent, excellent. Well, with your guys' combined experience, it's over 60, actually over 70 years of experience in the industry.
Yes.
That is very impressive. So that definitely makes you experts in my book.
Well, thank you, Stephanie.
Absolutely. So our audience today is really, it's going to be their event. They drove this by submitting all of their questions online today. And so we're going to pick a random amount of questions because to the people that are watching today, your submissions have been so overwhelming. This is actually one of our biggest events we've ever had. And not only are we streaming on our live event today, but we're also streaming on our Peak Commercial and Industrial Facebook Live event. We are super excited for that, and we're so happy that you guys are a part of that. So for the audience that are watching today, if your question gets answered live, you will receive our stainless steel Yeti tumbler in the mail, so we'll reach out to you after today. But for those that did submit a question and it didn't get answered live, please know that we are going to answer every question that was submitted. So if you have additional questions while you're watching today's event, drop it in the comments below, whether it's on Facebook or on our brand platform, and we'll be able to answer those questions after the fact. So we are just so grateful that you're participating today, so thank you so much. So guys, you ready to get started?
Oh,
Let's
yes,
go.
we are.
All right.
Let's have that first question.
There you go.
All right, so our first question comes from Diana Mayer. She is based out of Wisconsin, and her question is, what does antifreeze protect? Ron, I'll hand this over to you.
Well, antifreeze is an important fluid in your car. It generally is seen, certainly from Wisconsin, it would be for freeze protection would be one of its main things, but what antifreeze is really developed for is to cool your engine.
Okay.
And in that process, these fluids become in contact with the metal, and the fluids in the metal can react to cause corrosion, and so you have to have some inhibitors in there to give it rust and corrosion protection, and so that's really what an antifreeze does. It protects your engine from freezing and from boilover and from rust and corrosion.
Correct.
Excellent, excellent.
Right. And in the heavy duty industry and using this in a Class 8 vehicle, we need extra inhibitors in there to protect against liners from pitting,
That's right.
blocks from cavitating. So it is important to maintain the inhibitors, and that's part of what antifreeze does.
Okay, great, great. So our second question comes from Kim, and she's based out of California. And her question is, does the color of the coolant have any significance?
Well, I'll take that one, Ron,
Go.
if you don't mind. Well, you know, in years past, the major blenders of coolant always adhered to a simple color code.
Okay.
Green meaning automotive, and then as we move forward into some heavy-duty coolants, a pink fuchsia color for heavy-duty. And then as we moved into the world of extended life coolants, we moved into some colors of orange and red. And where the buyer truly has to beware and be advised is that there are certain blenders out there that do blend a red coolant, and the end user thinks that because it's red, it's an extended life coolant. He needs to be aware that that coolant may not be an extended life coolant. It just may be dyed red,
Okay.
and it has no inhibitors in there at all to protect the heavy-duty diesel engine or meet the OEM specifications for coolant.
Okay.
So he has to be aware and beware. So buyer beware in buying coolant. You do want to buy your coolant from a reputable coolant blender in the industry.
And the color that happens to be maybe in their OE manual.
Well, that does, color standards are written in the industry, and so he can follow those standards, especially RP 351 at TMC I just rewrote that for TMC, and that kind of guides the end user
okay.
to say, hey, this color is this technology. It truly does help with understanding color.
Okay.
Any customer can always reach out to Old World, our engineers, or Ron himself or myself. Just contact us, and we'd be more than happy to work with you and explain what product you have in the shop and what it is in technology.
Excellent, excellent, good information. So our next question comes from Tommy H. He's based out of Tennessee, and his question is, what are the pros and cons in using deionized water versus tap water when diluting concentrated coolants?
Well, at the factory where we manufacture coolants, we always use deionized water because that is the optimum water to use with your coolant. When you get into using tap water in certain parts of the country, you can have some very hard water, and you can also have chemicals in that water that are there to protect yourself when you're consuming it, and so those chemicals are not are aggressive to the metal parts in your engine, and so we like to try and keep those out of the systems if we can.
Okay.
Right. And there are some ASTM tests for water. As Ron mentioned, certain parts of the country have hard water. An area like Carlisle, Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that gas patch up there has a lot of limestone in that water, and that's very aggressive against engine blocks and will tear an engine block apart without that end user even knowing it.
Wow.
So we always recommend, please buy your coolant in a 50-50 premix. We don't want you to use your water because your water can have a lot of sulfuric acid in it. It can have a lot of chlorine in it. And chlorine is going to be very aggressive against aluminum components and gaskets that are in the system. So we always recommend buy your premix coolant.
Wow, great information. The next question comes from Jeff. He's based out of Dayton, Ohio. And his question is, peak coolant pet friendly, or are there any pet friendly options available?
Generally, coolants today are made with ethylene glycol. Ethylene glycol is toxic to pets and humans both. There is a small amount of propylene glycol-based coolants out in the marketplace, but a very small amount. Sierra is a brand that happens to be a PG-type product, which is propylene glycol, which is safer. Ethylene glycol is toxic, but is not extremely toxic. There's about probably 50 chemicals underneath your kitchen sink that are more toxic than the ethylene glycol. What we find, and the biggest problem we have, is with the owners and how they store their coolant. A lot of times they'll put their coolant in the garage and then they'll leave their dog in the garage. The dog gets bored and he starts chewing on things, and next thing you know, he's chewed into some, an antifreeze bottle and gotten some product on the floor. And since dogs don't really have a sense of taste like humans do, it's hard for them to discern that this is not not something for to consume, and it is very painful death for the animal. But there are antidotes out there. So if your dog does show signs, if you see something like that occurring in your garage, just get your dog to the vet just quickly as you can. Usually they can save the animal.
Okay, good advice. Good advice.
And as a blender, we do put bitterants in coolant to try and help prevent animals or deter animals from drinking antifreeze.
Good information. So the next question comes from Tony Guerrera. He says he's based out of the Midwest, and
is he in the witness protection program out there?
He just says Midwest, and he says, please explain the difference between SCA and ELC.
Well, let's I'll touch base on this, Ron,
sure,
and you chime in if you need to. SCA stands for a term, supplemental coolant additive.
That's right.
Some other folks in blenders of additives call it DCA, diesel coolant additives. The two terms are synonymous with each other. There's no difference. So What is an SCA? It's an inhibitor to go into coolant so that you maintain the protection in a heavy-duty diesel engine.
Okay.
They use SCAs. So test strips are available to test the nitrite levels and elevate either through spin-on or cartridge filtration to add inhibitors with charged coolant filters or with liquid SCAs or DCAs. What's ELC? ELC is a term that nobody owns. It's an extended life coolant, and what it means, typically an extended life coolant does not use SCAs as its inhibitor package.
Okay.
It uses what's called organic acid technology, or what folks call OAT. A lot of folks have learned to use the term NOAT, a nitrated organic acid technology. So there are nitrite-free technologies today, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, as questions come along moving forward. So SCAs are totally separate than organic acid technologies.
Gotcha. Okay. Ron, would you like to add to it at all?
Just the fact that extended life coolants don't use supplemental coolant additives.
Okay.
You get no advantage by adding supplemental coolant additives to extended life. The benefit you get from extended life is because of the inhibitors that we have engineered out, which are mainly in those SCAs.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. So for those watching today, we are in our world headquarters in the Chicago area, and it is storming. So if you happen to hear some thunder in the background, this is live, so you never know what's going to happen, but we do have a little bit of a storm going on, so hang with us.
Yeah, and Ron and I are hoping we can get out
That's
on our
right,
planes.
we fly away in different directions.
So our next question comes from Mustafa. He's based out of the Chicago area, and his question is, which antifreeze is universal and can be used in all vehicles?
There really is no universal coolant.
Okay.
There are coolants that call themselves universal, and this came about when we had multiple colors in the marketplace for the automotive side, where we see it used most often. Basically it was just a term that you could put a coolant in with any coolant, and you could be assured that it would not cause really big major problems in your system.
Okay.
But there is no such thing as a universal coolant, especially when you deal with automotive versus heavy duty. Automotive coolants have one set of inhibitors. Heavy duty coolants have an additional set of inhibitors. And so you can't really say you have a universal coolant out there. There are some coolants that you could recommend to be used in both, providing that your fleet might be outside of a warranty. This product right here, Final Charge Global, is an outstanding product that could be used both ways, but it would not meet automotive specs, but it would still work in the system.
Sure.
And so you need to be cognizant of what your warranty might require, and always go with what your warranty says to maintain your vehicle while you're underneath warranty.
Right.
Makes sense.
And the
Good
term
advice.
universal became problematic a number of years ago, as some of the blenders were using the term universal. But with the components under the hood today, especially in the heavy duty world of aluminum radiators and EGRs and the excessive heat, those universal coolants that were started years ago are truly do not meet the OEM specifications today.
Okay.
So a customer needs to be careful of a blender trying to market to them a universal coolant. You do want to reach out to the experts and say, does this coolant, can I use one coolant in my shop across the board, automotive or heavy duty? And again, OEM requirements and warranty are the biggest questions that come into play.
Okay, fantastic. So our next question comes from, I believe it's Trina or Trina, and this person is from Tisdale. And the question is how often do you recommend testing coolant in Tier 4 engines, and what do you recommend testing it for? And
Joe, that's
Ron,
yours.
Joe?
Well, there you go. Wow, that got thrown at me. So Tier 4 engines, meaning these engines with diesel particulate filters, EGR systems, SCR systems using DEF or urea. So the question I think she's asking is, can you repeat the question, so I answer it properly?
Sure. How often do you
How
recommend?
often? Okay, so any coolant system, whether it is automotive, heavy duty, medium duty, off-road, on-road, we always recommend, because that driver, he may introduce excessive water to the system and dilute the inhibitors and dilute the glycol. He may introduce a glycol that's not the same technology, so an SCA inhibited glycol on top of a nitrite-free, so he'll be diluting inhibitor packages. He won't be contaminating the systems, diluting them. So the concern is, when that vehicle left the barn, did something else get introduced to that system? So we highly recommend, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 months, take a peek at the coolant. Make sure it's not diluted. Test the color, the clarity, the odor, smell it. Odor is a great indicator of an issue, and we'll discuss that, I'm sure. Test the freeze point. I mean, 50-50, Ron keeps reiterating, that's a perfect mix. We understand it's not a perfect world. So somewhere between that 40, 60, 60, 40 water glycol content is what you truly want in a system, as close to 50-50. There are chemistry charts that are available that we can provide to you to adjust the system. So a 10-gallon system may need a quart or two of water to bring it back to minus 34 degrees. And then chemistry. Are we using an older green or fully formulated coolant? Are we using a nitrated organic acid? Are we using today's fills in a lot of vehicles of what we call nitrite-free? How do we test those coolants? So you need to test the chemistry. So every 3 to 4 months, every 600 to 800 hours is pretty aggressive. Every, I'll say, 25,000 miles max in an over-road vehicle. That's some of the concerns. With a lot of extended service interval oil changes occurring, we were noticing that fleets were not checking the coolant. They were doing their coolant check at extended service interval oil change, and that's a little too far out because we can contaminate. So a fleet needs to put in a program of testing their coolant in those time frames, 3 to 4 months, 25,000 miles.
And when you're talking about fleets, they need to be careful not to just check what's in their overflow tank, because that may not be representative of what's in the engine. So we recommend that if you do take a sample to check, you take it somewhere out of the stream, out of the radiator, if you can, so that you get a proper idea of what is in that coolant.
So the second half of the question is, what do you recommend testing it for? So what are they looking for when they do a test?
Well, you're looking to see if, number one, the first and best thing you can do is check for your freeze point. If your freeze point is at minus 32, you're at a 50-50 mix. This is what we keep talking about, trying to stay right in that range. That's the simplest thing you can do. The next thing you can do is try to check for your inhibitors that are in the coolant. If you've been diluted with water and you don't have enough inhibitors there, then you lose protection. And so the key is over a period is look at the coolant. If it's clear, like Joe said, if it looks,
the color's good, we don't want it to be black or brown.
But if it's black or brown, then you might have some contamination with, transmission fluid or engine oil. And so certainly if you find those things, you have to correct the problem. There's nothing you can do to change the coolant to help that situation. You've got to correct the problem and then put new coolant in.
There's basically, when I preach and teach, I provide 5 simple test procedures in the field, in the shop, for the technician to use. First is color. It doesn't matter what color it is, as long as it's a vibrant color. We don't want the brown or black. Clarity, we need to be able to see right through that sample. We don't want to see oil, fuel. We don't want to see debris. Odor, if there's a chemical reaction, you may have a rise in the pH of the system, and as that reaches 11.0 in pH, you're going to know that because it's going to smell like ammonia, dead fish, a baby diaper is a good, a pretty gross smell, and ammonia is the indication. And then freeze point, we keep talking about freeze point. It is important not to dilute a system or not to have over concentration. More is not better in straight antifreeze, guys. Concentrated coolant, A, doesn't have any water to dissipate the heat. B, glycol will accelerate its aging process when it's too concentrated. So you need to do that. And then the last thing is, what technology are you using? If you're using an SCA, then you need a nitrite test strip. Today, a lot of factory fills are quote-unquote nitrite-free. So Ron, there is a test strip in front of you there. This is a simple single pad test strip. that'll test for inhibitors in OAT. This is not testing the nitrites, this is testing the inhibitor package for organic acid technology. So a simple pass-fail reading, hey, it passes all those tests, you should be good to go to the next service interval. So the final charge global test strip is a great way to test today's factory fills for organic acid technology that are nitrite free.
Wonderful, wonderful. For those watching, if you cannot feel their passion and their knowledge through the camera, then we might have to do this again, because the passion here is outstanding. So thank you guys for that.
Yeah, you know, a lot of folks don't know this, and Ron's read this 1,000 times through the years. More than 40% of engine downtime is coolant related. That's a tremendous amount of time a vehicle is in a shop for downtime, from water pumps to engine failure to radiator failure, hose failure, gasket. We can go on and on, but I'd be boring the audience.
Yeah. Well, for those that are watching, this is live, but we will have a copy of the replay that we will be sending out. So there have been a tremendous amount of great tips. So hopefully you've got your pen and paper ready. If not, then you definitely watch the replay at the end. So our next question comes from Kelly. She is based out of Iowa, and her question is, what maintenance is needed for the new Fleet Charge Hybrid Blue antifreeze to ensure that you get full life?
Well, I'm going to kind of take that question, and Ron can enhance on it. The reason Old World decided to blend this new coolant for Old World, but it's a coolant that's been in the industry for a while.
Okay.
An OEM engine manufacturer had a blue coolant, which is a hybrid coolant. Okay. So hybrid meaning it takes an inhibitor package from various avenues and blends it together. Okay. Their decision was to dye it blue. We're copying that color so that we meet that OEM specification. So the question is, how do I test this coolant? Right. Well, since this coolant is a hybrid, it does use SCAs and some automotive type of inhibitors along with some organic acid. So it uses multiple protection avenues to give it some protection. But a lot of OEMs today do not allow nitrated coolants in their system. They actually void warranty.
Oh, no
kidding. And the world is kind of looking at nitrite-free coolants. This coolant is a nitrated coolant. So you ask how to test, use those same 5 test procedures. It's blue, make sure it's a nice healthy blue. The clarity, odor, make sure it doesn't have an odor, ammonia smell. Freeze point the same way, use the refractometer, the analog or digital refractometer. Do not use test strips, Ron. Do not use test strips to test freeze point. They, because of the dyes in these colors, especially red, you get a false reading. Now for the blue, use the SCA nitrite test strip to make sure your inhibitor package, which the blue is a hybrid with nitrites, make sure your inhibitors are there. Make sure your nitrite levels are at about 1,400 to 2,000.
Good information. So, Ron, would you like to expand on that at all, or?
The blue coolant is truly a fully formulated type coolant.
Correct.
Yeah.
They call it extended life, but it has all the attributes of a fully formulated coolant.
Okay.
They say it's 150,000 mile initial, 150,000 mile initial use, but you still have to put SCAs in. So just beware that you don't have an extended life coolant with the blue technology. You've got conventional technology that has all the inhibitors in it that we've engineered out in our new extended life coolant. So today, I kind of view that type of technology as moving into the past with the new nitrite-free ELC coming forward as the predominant coolant in the marketplace.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Good information. The next question comes from Amanda. She is based out of Illinois. Said, what is the biggest difference between the NOAT and the OAT antifreeze?
Well, really, they're very much the same. Very close. Not all coolants use the same inhibitor packages out there. There are different inhibitor packages. But basically, nitrites were put into coolants to protect wet sleeve liners. And what we found is that nitrite-free products also, with the addition of molybdate, can also protect wet sleeve liners very well.
Okay.
And so some OEs have had concern about nitrites, and so that's why you're seeing nitrite-free coolants come. What we know about these two products is they're pretty well interchangeable, except for the nitrite fact that if you have a nitrite-free system and you put nitrated coolants in it, you're now going to have a nitrated system. But as far as performance of the engine, we don't see any major issues with those two technologies being mixed, except for those engines that do not want nitrite in them.
Okay.
And of course, there are several manufacturers out there that are that way.
Okay. Right.
But from a performance standpoint, in the majority of engines that are out there, we don't see a problem. But if a manufacturer wants nitrite-free coolant, we've got one for them.
So if somebody accidentally puts one technology in and it doesn't have that currently in the system, it's not going to affect performance.
Shouldn't.
Okay.
Shouldn't.
It
Shouldn't.
should
I mean,
not.
certainly you're talking about a system that's got 13 gallons. So you top up with 1 gallon of a nitrated coolant, you've got a very diluted nitrite
Right.
level, okay? But if you keep doing that, then at some point in time, you're going to have a fully nitrated coolant, right?
Right.
And so you don't want to do that. Now, certainly you can put the OAT on top of any nitrated coolant, and there is absolutely no issues there whatsoever. We've done that in several fleets where we've just changed them from nitrated coolants to OAT by top up. Now, we don't advise doing that from fully formulated to extended life, because that you can get into inhibitor problems there. But if you have a nitrated system and you want to go to nitrite free, all you have to do is stop using the nitrated coolant, use the OAT, and as your new vehicles come in with OAT, you're going to be putting the right coolant into those new vehicles.
Gotcha.
So Ron's talking about new vehicles and understanding the industry itself. All of Asia, all of European vehicles have been using nitrite-free type of coolants.
Okay.
Here in North America, the automotive world has always been nitrite-free.
Yes.
Okay.
The light-duty world has been nitrited, as you've seen some products that are hybrids or gold type of coolants. They were nitrited, and the addition of certain components under the hood have moved the engine or the OEMs from a nitrated coolant to a nitrite-free coolant. So specific in the Class 8 world, Freightliner or Daimler Trucks North America moved to nitrite-free factory fill in April of 2015. Earlier this year, January production for Volvo Mack, they moved to nitrite-free. Our friends at International in 09, 2010, they moved to a nitrite-free factory fill at that time. And Evolution today, they're on a red extended life coolant. The only OEMs, two OEMs that I know of that are factory filling with a red extended life nitrated coolant, CAT is still on that technology, and PACCAR today is still on that technology in Kenworth and Peterbilt. The word is that PACCAR is looking at the nitrite-free coolant, and will they and when will they move to nitrite-free? That's a question for those engineers at PACCAR. We can't answer that yet, but my belief is the world will all be on nitrite-free coolant within another year or two.
Wow. Okay. So why was nitrites put in the first place?
Well, if
That's just out of my-
Ron's the old timer, so we're going to let him grab that green
He's just
gallon
loving the
over
air.
there, you know.
Right. Well, to begin with, when you went for heavy-duty diesel engines, you had a automotive system and a heavy-duty system, and the heavy-duty system was always had nitrite in it, because nitrite was the primary component for wet sleeve liner cavitation protection in the heavy-duty diesel engines. This is this is really a U.S. phenomenon, because Cat, Cummins, and Detroit Diesel at the time were in a horsepower battle. And of course, you know, how do you create more horsepower? Is you've got to be able to protect those liners. You know, you want to get a liner surrounded with coolant, and they've got larger and larger liners, which are subject to cavitation. And as they did so, trying to create more and more horsepower, they deemed that, you know, you need nitrite. So that history of nitrite protection from liners, when we brought extended life coolants to the U.S., many OEMs wanted to maintain that idea that, geez, I got to have nitrites there for wet sleeve liner cavitation. I think what over time has happened is the fact that carboxylics themselves give wet sleeve liner cavitation, plus the addition of molybdates to those products have kind of assured everybody now over time as people use them, right? People are getting more and more comfortable with the fact that, geez, I don't need nitrite. And so people are starting to change. And, you know, change is very hard for
Yes,
everybody.
absolutely.
And especially in an industry. You have to realize why things take so long. And especially now, if you go back to the history days, right, when we were selling coolants to OEMs, they had qualified chemists that would challenge us on our formulations. And they would challenge every component that's in a you know, they would understand the chemical reaction of how this stuff actually worked, and so they would challenge you on it. And right now what has happened is most of these OEs have gotten rid of all this expertise. You know, this downsizing in the organizations out here has gotten rid of the expertise that has been out there. And so now, used to be an engineer had a chemist that would give him some backup protection to make a change.
Sure.
It's not the case now. So now what has to happen is the market has to coerce everybody into the change. Because what engineer is going to take a risk of moving from something that works very well for them,
Sure.
right, which the technology does,
Right.
into something new? You know, there's no upside for the engineer. You know, there's only a downside. He can only fail because this coolant's already working really well,
Sure.
right? And
makes
the
sense.
components that they're using in their engines, it's not a problem, right? And so why am I going to change?
That's right.
You know, let the world change. They changed some stuff to their engines that now maybe they're a little more delicate than our engines are, but our engines are robust. We can use this stuff, so we're still using it. You know, that's kind of
Interesting
life out
history.
there in the world, right?
Interesting history.
Yes,
That's good to
and
know.
we got to be careful with Ron because he used the word carboxylate acid. So for you folks out there,
That's
that go,
OAT.
what the heck is he talking about? That's organic acid technology. And if you need to know what a carboxylate acid is, just kind of send an email out, and we'll answer that question.
Yeah, drop it in the comments and we'll definitely answer that for you. All right, so moving on to our next question. We have Deanna from Nebraska. And her question is, what would be the best coolant that a customer could add with their other coolant they already have in their vehicle?
Wow, that's a tough one.
I think here you really kind of have to set some parameters.
Okay.
Because you would have to know what coolant your vehicle requires.
Sure.
Maybe not what coolant's in it, but what coolant does your vehicle require. Certainly, an owner's manual is going to tell you what specification
Right.
of all fluids that go in your car it needs. And so you should look at your owner's manual, understand what that specification is, and then buy a product that meets that specification.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that other products won't work, right?
Okay.
But that's the safest way.
It's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question.
it's a
Because if
tough-
it's a truck, then it needs to have a heavy duty product. If it's an
Right.
automobile, it needs to have a light duty product in
Sure.
it. You don't need to pay for the extra additives that are in this product, right, for light duty, because you don't have liner cavitation in automotive engines. You have solid blocks.
Right.
So hard to answer unless you know the particulars.
Gotcha.
And we can kind of enhance the way the question's asked to give you an answer. You know, a fleet wants to be on one coolant.
Okay.
So we can pick on a fleet and give you an idea of how we move them to one coolant. So we had a fleet in Nashville, Tennessee, approximately 3,000 vehicles. They were modern vehicles, meaning they were 2015s, going backwards to 2010s,
Okay.
to 2009s. So what we introduced to them is the Final Charge Global OAT technology, because that's what the OEM, the Detroit Diesel, Daimler Trucks North America, they wanted them to move towards the factory-filled nitrite-free. So what we did is we introduced those same 5 test procedures. I can't enhance that enough to the technician. Test these coolants, and when you get to the chemistry, if it passes, make sure you remove the SCA charged coolant filter and put a blank water filter or coolant filter on the system, non-chemical filter.
Okay.
And if it passed all 5 tests and it passed the inhibitor test for pass-fail, simply top off with the new coolant.
Gotcha.
Now, if a system was either low or failed the test, that's when we introduced a converter. So we took the older, possibly an SCA charged coolant, and we added a gallon of converter to that system.
Okay.
It dyed the system red, and it put the OAT into that system. So if a fleet truly wants to be on one coolant, we can kind of train them. But it is a lot of technical work for the technician to say,
Sure.
you need to put these 5 test procedures in place. If you don't, you could have issues. Now, that fleet in Nashville did a great job across the country. I did the personal training for them, and they moved to Final Charge Global, one coolant, their whole fleet.
Wow.
So it can be done,
a
and it
great
can be
testimony.
done without issues or cooling system failures.
The important thing here, though, is to get an expert.
Sure.
Somebody certainly from Old World can help you with this type of conversion. Attempting it on yourself, you can find yourself into some problems.
Okay.
You just need to be very, very careful. The biggest problem that we've seen with using a converter is the operator doesn't put ample test procedures in there to ensure that they've converted all vehicles.
Okay.
And in the past, when we did this way back when we introduced extended life coolants, we found that some customers think that they've converted and they haven't.
That's true.
And then all of a sudden, guess what? They have a failure. They call us up on the line and say, your coolant doesn't work. We say, send us a sample. They send us a sample and we say, you didn't put our inhibitors in here. It's not going to work.
Right.
You know, and so
They skip that vehicle.
Well, and now we have, you know, back then we didn't have this, which is a
Okay.
test strip.
Right, this is
This
great.
test strip right here, if you're going to make a conversion, then I'd certainly recommend that after every PM for maybe the next year,
Okay.
you test to make sure you've converted that vehicle, and that will catch any of your mistakes you might have made
That's
out
a great
there.
tip.
You know, especially more in larger fleets and in small fleets, right?
Okay,
And
sure.
we also provide surge tank stickers that hopefully they can adhere to the system on the radiator or the surge tank to say, hey, I have tested this vehicle. This is the date I tested it and retested it and retested
Sure.
it to make sure they keep doing those 5 test procedures. So it's important.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Man, I really hope you guys are taking some good notes because this is some wonderful information. So our next question is from Alex from Pennsylvania, and his question is, what is the difference between coolants? Conventional, OAT, NOAT, HOAT, etc. Are they compatible?
What I like to tell everybody is all coolants are compatible.
Okay.
Right? The issue is dilution. Certainly, if you have extended life coolants in a system, you don't want to add conventional additives because you're going backwards. You lose your benefits. Okay? If you have conventional systems and you add extended life, right, you're really not going to lose much protection whatsoever. You might actually have even a better coolant.
Okay.
So let's take the question of what's a conventional coolant.
Okay.
A conventional coolant is a product that contains inorganic inhibitors in it. Okay, and those what we consider those inhibitors of past: silicates, phosphates, borates, nitrites, nitrates in that product, and they form a film on the engine. That film goes away at 10,000, 15,000 miles, and that's why you had to replace your coolant, or you had to add SCAs to it.
Okay.
And so that's a conventional coolant. That is, you know, the last vehicles really using conventional coolants automotive were in 2002. Heavy duty wise, there's still maybe a few factory filling, but the vast majority, everybody's already on extended life coolant. So,
Okay.
so now what are these other terms? And so you go with HOAT, and I think
We
my
answered
colleague
that,
here
the
talked
hybrid.
about that a little bit. It means hybrid organic acid technology. And that's where not much of that is in the U.S., but certainly in Europe you see a lot of that because they were, just like here, they were trying to bridge that gap of getting from conventional to extended life.
Okay.
And so they still relied on some of those older inhibitors to give them protection, along with the newer inhibitors. And of course, as time went on, and by the time we introduced coolants in the U.S., it was clear that the hybrid coolants were really the older technology. The newer technologies were what we call the OAT technology. Okay. Now, OAT technology, as we describe it today, used to be nitrated, but when people talk about OAT only now, they're talking about a non-nitrated product.
Okay, nitrate free.
Right. So, you know, period in time, 10 years ago, if you talked about OAT, it would be nitrated because everything was nitrated. Okay. But now, where NOAT came from is they needed to differentiate between OAT and NOAT because engine managers didn't want nitrite in some of their
Sure.
platforms.
Right.
And so you have NOAT, that's a nitrated, and OAT has no nitrite.
Okay.
Did I get all of them?
You
You
betcha.
did.
Yeah,
Okay.
You did pretty good
that's
there, Ron.
very good.
I don't even have to chip in on this one.
And these guys are not looking at anything. They're just going off of what I'm telling them. So that was pretty impressive. Okay, so the next question comes from Kevin out of Billings. And I think you might have this, but you might have answered this briefly already. But what does nitrite-free mean in heavy-duty coolants? And
Okay.
why is the industry headed that way?
Okay, so we'll kind of both
Yeah,
play in on
you
this
already
one.
hit that pretty good,
So what basically the components under the hood, especially the aluminum heat transfer, whether it's heater core or radiator, when these are produced by the manufacturers, there's some concern with, and I'll say, quality control.
Okay.
So a series of the radiators are produced, and there's no issue with flux. But as the spray of flux gets to the end of the line, we start to get a series of radiators that are overfluxed, or a lot of fluoride in the flux that's getting sprayed into and onto these radiators. So the inhibitors in coolant in certain technologies counteract with that. So the OEMs, and I saw this tremendous back in 2007, 8, chasing around the country in the Thomas-built school bus world. They moved to a new aluminum radiator, and the factory-filled coolant was counteracting. And within 700 miles, I was seeing brown coolant in pretty purple or fuchsia color coolant. Then I saw this big time in Freightliner, the Detroit engine with the new cartridge coolant filter. The filter, the factory fill, was counteracting with these aluminum components. Now, it wasn't happening in every vehicle, but was happening enough for Daimler to say, we're going to move. We can see that it is the nitrites counteracting with the manufactured aluminum radiator. We're going to move to a nitrite-free coolant.
Okay.
So the industry international saw this with their dimpled radiators. They saw a chemical reaction back in 08, 09. They moved to a nitrite-free, and Volvo Mack has been seeing this for a number of years. They have now moved to nitrite-free. So the industry is moving there. Europe has seen it for years. They moved to nitrite-free coolant. So,
But what really happened in the U.S. is the radiator manufacturers changed their process and went from using a passivated aluminum to a non-passivated aluminum, which required this new flux. And so previous to that time period, and this product had been on the market for multiple, nitrated products have been on the market for forever, right? Is the radiator manufacturers actually stemmed this move from a nitrated coolant to a nitrite-free by using non-passivated aluminum, because they got a better flux with their aluminum radiators, and of course this allowed them to use thinner and thinner parts.
Of course.
Which
Less
save
weight.
less weight,
Right.
less cost.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
everything's a battle out there.
so Ron just showed his age there, He's showing the passivated.
I love it. That's a great history, about that. So thank you guys for that.
Sure.
The next question comes from Brad. He's based out of Van Buren. And the question is, what is the difference in red extended life coolants for heavy duty trucks and the multi-auto extended coolant for cars?
That was mine, I think, right?
Yeah, you can have
Okay,
that one to
I'll
start
take
with.
it.
If you
I'll
need
take
help,
it.
you let me know.
Okay, Joe.
I swear there's love up here.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, the real question is automotive product versus heavy-duty products.
Okay.
And so we kind of talked earlier a little bit about what the difference is there. Automotive products, automotive engines don't have wet sleeve liners in them, so they don't have wet sleeve liner cavitation. Heavy-duty engines, some of them do, some of them don't have wet sleeve liners, and if you have a wet sleeve liner, then you need cavitation protection. Automotive coolants do not contain the additives for wet sleeve liner cavitation, other than what protection you get from the carboxylic acids, which are this OAT, right, in that system. And they will give you some protection. But all your manufacturers really want an additional additive in there to give you better wet sleeve liner cavitation. And of course, that's where this type of product, our Final Charge Global, comes in. Is certainly an outstanding product for the heavy duty, nitrite free. It meets all the needs. you know, it's a million-mile coolant.
Right.
What can you say?
Simple
You
as
know,
that.
Simple as that. And so, you know, we have a warranty on that coolant. We stand behind our coolants. And Joe, maybe you can tell me, I don't think we've ever had to pay a warranty failure on this coolant.
I
have
don't
we?
think we have. It's million mile, 20,000 hour, and Frank Cook, Dr. Cook, has seen some applications to go to 40,000 hours. So we've done a great, the inhibitor package does a great job if the customer and user puts into play the simple test procedures. There are so many times I do a training, Ron, and I ask the question, what do you guys do for your maintenance program, coolant testing procedures? And their answer is, we top
Nothing.
off.
That's right.
We top off. That's crazy.
One of the downsides of these extended life products has been we have kind of led the consumer to believe that he can put them in and forget it, and that is not the case.
Okay.
You know, you have to monitor the fluids in your system, and coolants, just like any other fluid in your system, you need to monitor it, and you need to take care of it, and it can be diluted. So you need to look at it, and you need to test it. You know,
Okay.
and Joe's told us very well exactly how to do that.
Okay, very good. Well, this kind of adds to our current discussion. Bruce, out of Connecticut, he is asking, what makes Peak Funnel Charge Global the best for antifreeze needs of most consumers? So,
Yeah, go ahead. You can start,
I
man.
go
I can
again?
keep going. Yeah,
Oh,
you can
okay.
go again.
One of the things, Final Charge Global has been around for a very long time. This product's been used outside this country and inside this country with millions and millions of miles of use on it.
okay.
How else would we give it a million mile warranty? Basically, it's got a very robust package of inhibitors in it, probably twice as much as our competitors.
Yeah.
Maybe not
important.
twice as much all the time, but very close to twice as much inhibitors in there, and that's really the meat of what excuse me, the meat of what protects your engine.
Okay.
And so one of the things about this coolant is you can have a great deal of dilution, and it can still give you protection.
Wow.
Joe, you want to chime in?
No, and looking at this, and you guys don't mind if I pull this over, understanding again the coolant where Ron talks about water, glycol, inhibitor package, 48% of what's in this gallon, if it's pre-mixed, is water. 48% of the balance is ethylene glycol.
Okay.
And again, pure virgin ethylene glycol. So 96% of what's in here is probably in from the competitors too. The folks, the quality blenders
All the
of
same.
coolant, all exactly the same. And the difference from any coolant, whether it's automotive, heavy duty, hybrid, nitrited, is that little bit of 4% of the inhibitor package. And in some blenders, they only put about 2% inhibitor package in there.
Interesting.
In some
Okay.
blenders, even less. I've seen some product in Pennsylvania do that. So that's the difference between these coolants, and what makes Final Charge Global and why you want to have an upcharge. You know, why are you a couple pennies more per gallon? Well, sir, we're 50% at least more inhibitor in our coolant. That's how we can give you that million mile, 20,000 hour, 8-year warranty using that in your heavy duty diesel engine.
Okay.
Plus, going back to that theme of buyer beware, is there's really only 13 states in the U.S. that have any kind of program with which to monitor coolants.
Oh, really?
And so there's no policeman out there saying that what's in this jug is what we say it is. Now, like Joe said earlier, you buy from a major manufacturer, you're going to get what they say are in there. But if you start buying sub-brands of products out there, and if you find a price point on a product that's less than what's normal in the marketplace, buyer beware.
Okay.
Right, and
Good
the best recommendation I can give to any salesperson who's trying to get business or protect their customer from a bad vendor is let's get a coolant sample from that competitor. Let's get it to an independent lab. The analysis of that coolant is going to tell Ron or I, hey, this is quality water. This is quality glycol, not used glycol,
Right.
and this is a quality inhibitor package that meets OEM specifications, and that's important. So that's where Ron and I can truly come into play to help be the policeman in the industry. And I always, since I've been chasing some bad coolants in the industry, I always consider myself the bad cop or the good cop in the industry. I've found some very bad coolants out there that are being labeled quality, and they're not. So
Interesting.
it's important that that end user have that
Be aware.
virgin, be aware, and have it analyzed.
Okay.
And that's where the research comes into play.
Okay, very good. Well, we are coming up on, we're about 50 minutes in, so we've got maybe just a few more questions that
Okay.
we can answer, and then we're going to wrap up. So the next question comes from Bill from Washington, and his question is, can I use Fleet Charge in my new vehicle that has been factory filled with red heavy-duty ELC?
Okay, I'm going to kind of jump in to start, and then Ron will take over. Here's my concern, Bill from Washington, is that right?
Yeah, Bill from Washington.
Right. Well, you know, we talk about OEM today. We talk about Daimler's attitude towards certain technologies. You need to be careful. If you take Fleet Charge and top it off on a Daimler vehicle built after April 2015, you're going to void warranty. And clear as day, they state that. I don't know what Volvo Max attitude is today in writing for warranty, but as January 2018, they moved away from nitrited coolants, all nitrited coolants, to nitrite-free. So you need to be aware.
But the biggest thing is for his own personal knowledge of what's going to happen in his vehicle. If he's got a red extended life coolant in there, such as Final Charge, he's got an optimal product. If you take and put Fleet Charge, which is a great fully formulated product, into mix with this product, you know, you're not going to have a disaster, but what you're going to put back in are silicates, phosphates, and borates. They're going to hamper your heat transfer. You know, they're not going to, you're probably going to have adequate freeze protection unless you get a lot of dilution with that product. But you're going to have a lesser coolant than what you started out with. And so the manufacturer saw fit to put that coolant in there because they believe it's better technology than the fully formulated.
Okay.
So why would you as a consumer, just because you're used to using that product, think that it's better than what the OEM is now using? Correct. And that's really just resistance to change, and we all do it. Right. We all resist change, and we all find ourselves stuck in what we were, where, when, and you know.
Sure.
And that's just a case of that. Right. So move forward. Extended life coolants are here. They're here to stay. Nitrite free is coming. It's going to be here for a long time. So don't move backwards in technology. It won't do your vehicle any good. We've even had people call us and tell us that, hey, I switched from red to fuchsia and now I've got an overheat problem. Well, what they don't realize is extended life coolants give you 8% better heat transfer than fully formulated coolants. And all of these engineers now are looking to save money, right, with hoods decreasing and everything. And so they figure that 8% heat transfer into the calculation of how they build that cooling system. And so when you switch backwards, you take that 8% away. And so we've seen some vehicles go immediately into overheat. Of course, we can, you can correct that. You just have to drop that coolant, put the other coolant back in, and then over time, your heat transfer will come back to you.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. Good answer. We have a question. Ron from Illinois is it okay to use recycled coolants? What do you guys say about that?
Well, the issue is as simple as there are very few recyclers here in the United States or North America that use the proper equipment and process to recycle. So there are folks that make inhibitors that won't sell to 95% of recyclers because their process is horrendous.
Okay.
So what you're trying to do is take a glycol that's come out of the waste stream, whether in a building or a vehicle, automotive, you're taking inhibitors that came out of conventional to hybrid, and you're putting them all into this recycling bin, and you're trying to take just the glycol out. So there are processes, and very expensive processes. That's where I get concerned with the recycler selling coolant for $4 or $5 a gallon under the market price, or what the market calls for. So it's very important that if a end user or a salesperson is up against a recycler, it is very important. Let's get a sample of that product that's about to be sold to Mr. Customer, and let's get it to the lab. We're going to analyze it in every way, shape, or form. We're going to know if the water's good, if the glycol has been recycled properly with reverse osmosis or distillation, so that the degradation acids of that glycol are removed. And then have they removed all the metals, and have they removed all the inhibitors and then re-inhibit it properly? Almost every single recycled product I see in the marketplace, I see as a fully formulated or hybrid, and that's going to void warranty in 3 of the OEMs today. So why go that direction when they don't have the proper procedures to so buyer beware, get me a sample, let me analyze it, let the lab tell you what's in that.
Okay.
The real problem with recycling is the economics don't work.
What do you mean by that?
It costs too much to take the spent, even if they get the spent product for next to nothing. Then they still have to transport it, then they have to do these processes to it.
Right, okay.
Then they have to blend it. Now, if you're not a major blender, you know, how good are they going to be, even if they get the process to where it needs to be as to blending the product back in a proper manner? And so, just like Joe said, there's a couple people out there that do it and do it right, and we support those kind of people 100% because recycling is a great idea. The problem is, you know, some people run it through a sock and you know, I mean, seriously,
That's true.
they put it through a filter. It's just like running it through a sock, and then they sell it.
True.
You know, and so
They
and if
dye
you-
it the right color, and it's comes. Oh, it's recycled. I'm green.
Right, and when they had fully formulated coolants, you got to remember you're continually adding SCAs to fully formulated coolants. So you are continually re-additizing whatever it was you had in there.
Okay.
And so what you started with could be suboptimal, but the SCAs can cover up the fact that it was
Got it.
suboptimal because nobody ever pays attention to exactly where their SCA levels are.
To end that conversation, real simple. This is an 8-year, million-mile coolant, correct? Read any jug of a recycled coolant. You know what it says? 2 years, 150,000 miles. How is that end user green when he's putting 4 times
Right.
waste into the atmosphere when we're never putting
Good
waste
point,
into
Joe.
the atmosphere? So it's kind of interesting. So there are white papers. Please reach out. Hey, is that me? Is that a cutoff? Is that what that means? So, you know, just again, buyer beware. Reach out to Ron or myself. We'll provide you with the white papers on recycled coolant and the information that you as an end user or you as a salesperson need
Yep.
on recycle.
And we do have a white paper. If you go to peakhd.com and you go to our blog, it'll actually show a white paper from Dr. Frank Cook that's been with the company for many years, and he actually did a white paper on recycled coolants. So hopefully that's very helpful as well. So our last question, because we're coming up on the hour, you guys have
Okay.
been amazing with your information. But the last question comes from Robert Braswell, and he is actually from TMC.
Yes.
His question is, fleets appreciate industry standardization whenever possible. What is your company doing to encourage adoption of industry standards in the coolant and cooling system arena?
Well,
Joe, why don't you take that?
yeah, I'll kind of give a good shot at this, only because Robert and I are understand the industry, and Old World is heavily involved as members and in writing standards for ASTM. You mentioned Dr. Cook, Dr. Alexi Gershon, John Myers, they're all, I'm sorry, John Turney, they're all members of ASTM, and they help to write ASTM standards.
And what is ASTM?
The American Society of Testing Measures, I
Measures,
believe, is
okay.
exactly what it stands for. I personally am a member under the American Truckers Association
Okay.
for the Technology and Maintenance Council, or what's called TMC.
Okay.
TMC, I just completed rewriting the RP 351, which is the guidelines for color standardization of engine coolant.
Okay.
So what the major blenders want to do is kind of say, hey, this is green, old automotive, this is orange, some sort of organic acid technology, automotive, this is pink or fuchsia, this is fully formulated heavy duty, this is some sort of blue, which could be
Okay.
hybrid, and then this is red. Factory fill for everything today. 98% of OEMs, 98% of all factory fill is red extended life coolant.
Heavy duty.
Heavy duty extended life coolant. Very little is any other color in the industry. So TMC will have their meeting coming up in September
Right.
here in Orlando, September 16th through the 20th. Competition for the Super Tech across the nation will be held there. Future Tech, very proud to see a gal win Future Tech and win the award for Future Tech at last year's September TMC. So proud of her.
That was a great story.
Yeah,
that was
a great story, and you can reach out to me for that story, but she won. And Ron, anything else in the
Yeah, I
industry?
just add that TMC can't solve this problem.
Right.
This problem is created by manufacturers who try to differentiate their product by color. And this is going to go on forever. We're never going to get it all right. You're never going to have one standard because people are going to still make gold coolant. They're going to make, different color of fuchsia coolant. They're going to make whatever they want to try and differentiate. It's a marketing tool. Just beware.
Okay, very good. Well, to our watchers and our audience, we have come up on an hour, and hopefully you got some great information from these two experts. I definitely reach out if you have any additional comments, or maybe you want to see a part 2 of this. Drop your comments below, and we're definitely going to reach out. And for those of you that were not able to have your question answered live, please know that we will be answering your questions behind the scenes. And with that, if you have additional questions, you can always reach out to your Peak Commercial and Industrial representative for questions, or head over to peakhd.com for even more information. And on behalf of myself, Ron, and Joe, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Take care. We've enjoyed it.